some level of
just uncertainty brings down, like once people begin to feel uncertain that we could
Dream the other night that
uncertainty
Bryce
in
fell
this
on the chair,
course.
snapped his head. And I wanted to he passed out. So my mom was just like gaping with
I see Dateline stories about that.
right. So I was panicking and I needed to, the ambulance wanted to know where to take him. And I was calling her office and trying to tell her, you go in and you get him. I need to know where to take him for a TBI. And they're like, he's the patient. I was like, I don't care, you go get him. I was so frustrated, like, I need to know where to send him. We all were in the elevator. That's what I kept thinking in my dream, like, oh, she was your staff would go get you. Very excited.
Every single one I let out.
Right, so, and then in my dream I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I do not want to be a patient.
He was here last week or last month or something.
Yeah, but he just looked at me like, math, you moron? I mean, without the you moron part, but I saw it. I mean, it was implied. Just on the way here, he said, I don't think I want to do it. He just said, ideally, you're not swimming. But I think I'm right. My mom said she might be able to come down for a little bit that weekend, so let me figure out something like, yeah, when's the part, like, what is that?
So the party is going to be on the 25th, but Luke so it'll probably be a little bit after lunch.
Okay.
He didn't want us to go there because they can't sit with us.
Yeah, right? Okay. I'll see what she couldn't come down the whole time, so I'll see what she's thinking. So I might need him to go somewhere one night, probably Sunday night or day. It's Memorial Day.
That one phone in the top.
So, and I'll just get home. We'll drive home from Alabama Monday, but it'll probably be late, so he can just, you can tell him whenever. Just don't want him home. I don't want him spending the night by himself.
These are all the good feelings. It feels like extra. Well, most are.
It's very well, main revenue most that's just the fact that it's too Yeah, because you. Dude, you could really just get around zero. But you need to.
Welcome to the May meeting of the Granville Exempted Village School District Board of Education. Please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. Will you take the roll, please?
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
Ms. Shaw? Here. Ms. Deeds? Here. Mr. Crum?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And just so everyone's aware, there is an error on the agenda under the consent agenda and the supplementals. Mr. Kiefer was added to the high school math team leader position, but that is a staff position, so he's not eligible to satisfy that requirement. So we will have one in June to replace Derek Hall. So.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a motion?
So moved as amended.
Aye.
Thank you.
Commendations.
Good evening, everyone. I know that you have a lot of things on your calendar this mayhem month, as we like to call it in Granville schools. All great things, though. Tonight, we get to recognize the math team that finished 4th in the state, 1st in the region in the Ohio Math League. From a team or a field of 57 high schools throughout Ohio, the GHS math team finished 4th in the state and 1st tied in the region in the Ohio Math League. The Ohio Math League is a series of 6 math contests given during the 23-24 school year, and there are no divisions by school size. Students who are recognized for their cumulative high scores were Luke Hahn, 4th in the state, Harrison McKinney, 15th, and Owen White, 22nd. Other students who contributed to the team score throughout the year were Kevin Gu, Callum Sproul, Jack Hahn, Priyanjoli Saduka, Owen Riney, Ryan Yingling Yang, Kyler Katona, Seth Winterhalter, Olivia Katona, and Brady McKinney, and Coach Carl Kiefer, who is, as I mentioned earlier, not a staff member, but a dedicated community member who gives a lot of time, talent, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to lead the Ohio Math League. In addition, we'd like to recognize Luke Hahn for finishing in the top 1% for the AMC 12 test and qualifying for the AIM test that he took in February. And as Mr. Kiefer alluded to me earlier, he qualified for that 4 times as a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, which is almost unheard of. So I would not want to challenge his math acumen, ever. So congratulations to the math team. Come on up and let's give them a round of applause. Take a picture or something. Congratulations. All right. Now we might have to scoot
Yep.
together.
Come on together a little bit more for me. Keep coming. Keep coming. Almost. Okay, all right. There we go, we're good. Yeah, no sneak by Ms. Brown. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Congratulations. You know, a lot of times we're here recognizing our artists and our athletes, but it's nice tonight where we recognize some of the academic achievement as well that I really love because it talks about the holistic education that we provide. In keeping in that same thread, the DECA state and national qualifiers, congrats to the following 19 students for their qualifying for the finals of the final round of states, and they are part of the top 12 competitors in the state for their event. We have Zoe Rishheimer Lee, Hospitality and Tourism, Professional Selling, 3rd place. Megan Comiskey, Retail Merchandising, 6th place. Caden Rosendahl and Dominic Muscarello, Startup Business Plan, 6th place. Leighton Mayberry and Ainsley Laidlaw Smith, Business Law and Ethics, 6th place. Sophia Cristal, Business Services, Marketing, 7th place. Aaron Guttridge, Independent Business Plan, 8th place. Alex Start and Dylan Lane, Entrepreneurship, 8th place. Lily Barton, Apparel and Accessories, Marketing, 9th place. Rhea Morris, Franchise Business Plan, 10th place. Dylan Pruden, Restaurant and Food Service Management, 10th place. Spencer Beckett, Max Haley, and Jackson Rudder, Integrated Marketing Campaign Event, 11th place. Skylar Carmen and Hannah Bishop, Community Giving Project, 11th place. Avery King, Accounting Applications, 12th place. And the following students attended the International Career Development Conference, ICDC, in Anaheim, California, at the end of April. Lily Barton and Ainsley Laidlaw Smith attended the Elevate Leadership Conference. Jackson Rudder, Dylan Pruden, and Sophia Cristal attended the Thrive Leadership Conference. Emma Redding attended Thrive as well and acted as our social media liaison during the conference. Megan Comiskey competed in the retail merchandising. Spencer Beckett and Alex Stark competed in our school store and retail operations. And Zoe Rishheimer Lee competed in the hospitality and tourism professional selling and became our first ever ICDC finalist. And she placed in the top 20 in her event. Congrats to all. We are very proud of your hard work. And we have Ms. Grace Siebold, who has taken the reins of DECA over the last couple of years and really elevated that program within the high school. And honestly, in a very short period of time, has started to compete with some of the programs that have been around for 10 or 15 years. 25 years. That's the issue, correct. If you're here representing DECA, please come on up. Grace, come on up.
We sadly have a lot going on. We actually have a charity event tonight for any patient, so it's been a busy weekend. Grace, how many times have you been here? I live upstairs, actually. Yeah.
This is an easier picture.
We actually are just across the street too, so.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Got it. It's been a busy night.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And next, we have an educator that we'd like to highlight. We'd now like to recognize GHS Social Studies teacher Jeremy Hopping for being named the Global Educator of the Year by the Columbus Council on World Affairs. We appreciate all that Mr. Hopping does to support global education in Granville schools. He was recognized for his achievement at the Global Scholars Diploma Graduation event and Take Action Fair at Otterbein on April 16th. So just a little background. We started the partnership with the Columbus Council on World Affairs, and actually Granville was one of the founding members. We partnered with the Columbus International High School and worked with the ESC and the Columbus Council on World Affairs to create this Global Scholars Diploma process. Jeremy was integral in the development of the diploma process, and then executing on its implementation within the school district. And Jeremy shared a couple of stories, but one of them was Mr. Bernath and Mr. Hopping were on a train in Shanghai, on a train to Shanghai with a bunch of students, and Mr. Bernath asked if Mr. Hopping would lead this process, and he said, I don't know if I was too tired or not knowing what I was agreeing to, but I said yes, and he's been a fantastic leader of that program. So congratulations, Mr. Hopping, well deserved, and we appreciate all the time in and out of the classroom that you give to our students and help them be prepared for their next step. So congratulations and well done, well deserved. Okay, that concludes our event, or our accommodations, not event. If you want to stay for the board meeting, you can. Brittany has an amazing 5-year forecast presentation, 30 slides, if you're interested. I'm joking. And so, but if you must leave, now's the time. Yes.
Yes.
I do. Sure. Okay. As we have people departing, I'd like to invite Mrs. Ormond, who is getting set up. As you know, this year as part of our board meetings, we've been adding in staff reports, not only for departments, but also from buildings. So we have GMS tonight. In June, we'll round it out with Mr. Hinton talking about the high school. So, and as you know, Mrs. Ormond is taking our 8th graders to DC in a very short period of time. So after her presentation, I have told her it's okay to leave. So, yeah. Yes.
Wednesday morning.
Oh, Wednesday morning?
Wednesday
Oh, wait. Okay.
At like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it's early. Portrait of a graduate.
Yes.
That's right. Resilience, adaptability. All right, take it away.
Good evening, hi everyone. I wasn't really sure what to highlight, and then it just dawned on me. We have 2 really good programs going on at middle school now. One we've had for a couple of years, but one is brand new this year, and they are just taking off so well. So I thought we would highlight those this evening. So I'm going to start with media from the middle. That's our classic social media, you name it, podcasting, we do it all. But it all started a year ago with we just wanted students to do the daily announcements. We were like, what is so difficult about this? Why can't we just have students do our daily announcements? Well, one thing led into another, and we were like, why couldn't we have video announcements? Why couldn't we do this? Hey, could they promote us on social media? Could we grow our social media? So lo and behold, media from the middle was developed. And so now we have the podcast room studio, we have the green screen, we have all kinds of cameras, we have microphones that kids just plug into their iPhones. And you wonder, well, how do you know that equipment? The students, it's truly unbelievable. The students have written grants. We have received numerous GPF grants. One student worked on a project and he went after it's the Mariah Team, or the Gibbs, Michael T. Gibbs Foundation, got that grant. And the sponsorships, which again, this was student-driven for sponsorships. So I had a group of students come to me wanting to know, why couldn't we do ads? And they said, the football game, you see all these ads, why couldn't we do ads for our videos? And so I'm like, I don't know, let's ask Mr. Brown. So we give it to Mr. Brown, and of course he gives us his blessing. And so the students just start reaching out to various people in the community. So we did bronze, silver, and gold level. We mostly have only received gold. These people have been very generous in the middle school students. And so then eventually I had to reach out to Brittany because we had students creating these accounts and activities, and so we needed a separate account just for that. So we got her blessing to help with that as well. So it's taken a lot of people to make all this happen, but it's just simply incredible. A couple other things I wanted to highlight, those are just some of our pictures up there, but we also do a bi-weekly video now. It's anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes long. And so a different student takes the lead as the editor for about 2 weeks. And it's been rather interesting to watch students have to check in with their classmates on, are you doing what you said you would do? How far along are you? Have you progressed in this part? And some kids it was natural, and other ones needed some mentorship and guiding. But that was pretty good. But the other thing that's really grown from it is just all the other ways that our specific class has helped people. So you see just a variety up here. We helped Mr. Brown with the video that he needed. Mr. Cronk was a guest reader, as was I, at the elementary school. So, but he had our students do it, which was smart. I did it on my own at home. I probably should have gone your route, but that's okay. And then the bus garage, we helped the bus garage. We were trying to make a video to attract new bus drivers. So there's many things we've done well beyond just meals. There's been plenty of times I've gone to them and just said, hey, we need a video in this. The kids need to be reminded about this. Will you create a video for me? It's really fun. Very fun. Oh, and then our social media followers has actually tripled. Almost quadrupled on Instagram and on X and on Facebook. All thanks to kids. These are just some quotes. I won't read through them or anything like that, but if you want to see them, I can share this with you by all means. So the next one is...
What staff support is used for that, or what time during the day does that happen? It seems this is something extra that we haven't done in the past. Where does it fit in the schedule? Or?
Yes, no, it is. It's third, right now it's currently third period.
So it's a class?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's class, it's elective, it's in 15.
Great.
We'll have it again next year as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Browder is the teacher, and Mrs. Bites helps out with it.
Excellent.
The other one we have is Experimental Learning Mastermind, or EL known for short. Mr. Browder does a phenomenal job with this. He partners up with Red Frame Lab in Denison and also several local businesses, and it takes them through the design thinking process. And different businesses each semester present the kids with a challenge that they have. So currently, this semester, the class has been working on a local hair salon had a problem with when people call off at the last minute. We need to know what other salons are doing. How can we work on this problem? So that's currently what they're working on. They'll present their findings to the owner. But they've done other ones too. Some of the, there are so many projects we can highlight, but we just threw a few up here to show you. This is Emma, and she wanted to do, this is last semester? Yeah. I think it was. It was. Yeah, last semester. She just wanted to do something to help the Humane Society Animal Shelter, and so she came up with safe and healthy dog treats, and she came up with it. Everything worked out. She came up with packaging. Cedar and Grove offered to have them in their shop, and she sells them and makes them, and then part of the profit goes to the Animal Shelter, Humane Society. I'm so sorry, I'm really hot. Anyway, it's just, another program we have is Smiles for Food, Lincoln Rogers. So he just wanted to help St. Vincent de Paul with lunches. So last year he did 50 lunches, got enough money to do 50 lunches. They were all in the classroom. They bagged up all these lunches, took them to St. Vincent de Paul. Just last week he did another one. We did 100 lunches. And before school was out, we're doing another 100. What is really interesting about this is he was struggling to figure out, where am I going to come up with this money to keep doing this? So it's really interesting. This next project, James, he does Chew for Charity. Who would have thought bubblegum? Oh, I guess I would have thought that, but it is taken off like firecrackers, man. So James Goolage brought in, he had the gumball machine. So he brought this in. I helped him get his first order of the gumballs and everything. And he called it Chew for Charity. The idea behind it was he wanted to, at the end of every year, offer staff members to apply for a grant that he would sponsor. He's already up to almost $1,000. It's just started this year. There is someone at that gumball machine all the time. Anyway, so, but go back to this one. So Landon approaches James to see if James would be willing to sponsor him to get food so he can keep making lunches. And so that's where we are right now. I actually called Brittany and I said, hey, how do you do this? And she walked me through the process. So he's taking part of his profits to help another student with their project. It's really incredible, I gotta tell you. Excuse me. Mia, this was pretty neat. Because Mia really, she could have just stopped. It was very important to her. She would always say, her quote was, just like toilet paper is very important and a necessity, and everyone needs it, so are feminine products for women. And so she was on a mission to get free products in our school. Well, lo and behold, we didn't know that. And at the very same time, our school counselor was doing the same thing. And so once she found that out, she was devastated, but she didn't stop, where she easily could have just said, oh, now we're going. Instead, she decided to go to the community. And she ended up partnering with Three Tigers, the station, and Harvest Pizza. And then she got a contact, Aunt Flo, which is the company that we're using. And they've partnered up. Anyway, long story short, many calls later, many Zoom calls later, many meetings in purpose, these companies agreed to buy these products and promote these in their businesses. And then we got the founder, Aunt Flo, to Zoom in to the class, and I actually got to sit in on that. And it was just incredible to hear her journey and how young she was and how many times people told her no. And her quote, if I remember correctly, was, I had to learn to build a muscle when people told me no. It's really fascinating. And a lot of our students have been, Channel 10 News has come to do shows on us. Denison, several reporters have done shows. WOSU was just there last week. We were on NPR this morning. It's amazing how we're taking off and we're adapting as well. So. Another project that we had here, Gavin Smith, Sticks for a Purpose. So Gavin loves hockey, but Gavin also wanted to do something for his father, who suffers from cancer and who was a firefighter first responder. So Gavin tried to work with hockey companies and do something with sticks, but he kept getting turned down. And so eventually he just took his own hockey stick and he put his dad's story on the hockey stick. Well, lo and behold, in doing that, he met up with a gentleman from Helping Hockey Heroes. I think that was it. Helping Hockey Heroes. And they help first responders. And so by doing that, he also got connected with Columbus Blue Jackets, and more so in Ohio State hockey. And so anyway, he got to design a hockey stick. They auctioned it off at the Columbus Fire Department, Columbus Police Department annual hockey game, and it raised $5,000. It's incredible. These are just some of the other quotes we have on here. A couple of things I didn't have pictures for. You probably heard a little bit about Adam Schmidt. He did his own project out at Raccoon Valley, where you can borrow sports equipment, turn in sports equipment. His took a long time too, because he took ELM last year and ran out of time, but never gave up on that project and kept working on it. And it finally recently just came to fruition. Will Kronk, Mr. Kronk's son, wanted to do a newspaper. This is our very first one hot off the press. Bootleg's Babble has great articles on it. Lots of QR codes, so you can go right to the podcast or right to the video if you want. And actually, he just sent me an email. He needs some questions answered, so I'll have to get back to him.
Wait till Wednesday.
For the next edition, so we'll have to get on that one next. But one other final thing too here I just want to share is we started an X camp, and so by that we have, as you know, we have late arrivals on Wednesdays, and so many of the middle schoolers, I mean not a lot, but many still come to school at normal time and they sit in a study hall. So students wanted to know if they could start sharing their talents with other students during late arrival. And so Mrs. Weiss heads this up. And so once a month, we have a student who wants to share their knowledge and their talent with other students, and they come during late arrival. We had a student who makes jewelry, and so she did a jewelry making session. We had another student who's like a master yo-yo person, and he was showing people how to do the yo-yo. So there's been a lot of cool things. We had one student who was showing students how to use a 3D printer. So we do those like once a month. Do a lot of talking there right now. But I just thought it would be really important to showcase some of the things that we're doing because, you know, we have to work with them. We have to role play. What would that conversation look like that you're having with that business person? How might that email sound? How do you address it? When you talk to someone on the phone, how do you talk? You're not talking to your friend. You're not using text lingo. It's really interesting. Or when they get frustrated, someone will say no, and you say, well, what do you do then? You have to keep going. How do you try again? Anyway, sending follow-up emails, follow-up phone calls. But anyway, it's very
That's great. I'm super excited. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I'm a big fan of like all the stories that come out on social media and things like that. Just like you can tell the energy from the kids and from the staff and from yourself. So like, thanks for sharing that and things. What are your ideas about how we make it more pervasive beyond individual classes and things like that?
It is growing, like ELM, the last 2 years, we've only had one period for it per day. It's all year long, but it's each semester. Next year, though, our numbers more than double, so we're going to have several periods of ELM next year, so that's good. The social media class, the media from the middle, it'll probably still stick with just the one period, but still the numbers are higher, so I see that growing as well. So I do think the potential is there to do more and more as people learn about us and the equipment that we're getting. And like I said, we're starting to branch out and doing more like videos and podcasting beyond just Grand Meetings.
That's great. Yeah, that's really cool. Great stuff. Thank
And
you.
Lisa, share, I think, I mean, it's not just in those classrooms, but in some of the regular classrooms with some of the SDL concepts, like your science department, really grasp onto that. So hopefully, students get to experience it in not just an elective, but in their core classrooms.
Yeah. I mean, we are trying really hard to do a lot more with student input and student choice in every class, not just these classes. And I mean, I'm amazed that the teachers are stepping out of their comfort zone and trying something new and really are starting to offer you more than one way to do something, more than one way to be assessed. It's incredible.
I bet the kids are going to blow into it, right? As the kids start to have experience doing this and have some classes where they have these options, they're going to be sort of expecting it or demanding it or just making it happen,
And
right?
hopefully you heard about some of the projects that Mrs. Hatt's science classes in seventh grade did with the solar eclipse. They did a lot of different
Yeah, yeah.
projects in Virginia, at Middleton, and a bunch of other places in Otterbein and stuff. In the elementary school and the intermediate school.
I'm just curious, how many students were in ELM? Because you said now it's tripled, right? The numbers, how many took this year?
This year, 34, I believe, and next year we have 68.
Wow, so that's 34 students in a classroom for
Well,
that period?
over 2 semesters, sorry.
Okay,
Yes, so you're looking at 16, 17 one semester, 16, 17 another.
Yeah, that's still a lot to manage when you're thinking about, I mean, they're learning a lot in terms of being able to manage their own selves and their projects and their, you know what I mean? Like that's.
It's a lot of work on Mr. Browder, and Mrs. Weiss does help too.
Yeah,
Mr. Browder does a lot of behind the scenes work
Yeah.
to make that happen.
Yeah, that's really neat.
I'm really excited. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help ensure that you have support and things like that. Because this is a great direction that we see the whole district going, so we appreciate your efforts on it.
You find income underneath the desk.
No, I was thinking that
Just asking, just asking.
You know, when I first came here, when I first came here, oh, it was so long time ago, there was no gun, We had that in school. Then we finally started allowing gun in school, and that was the thing. We're going to find it everywhere. It's going to be everywhere, but,
That means that done.
And because it's in a gumball machine and it comes out this way, there's no wrapper. Sometimes we do find wrappers on the floor, and I tell kids, pick up those wrappers. With this, there's going to be wrappers.
And there's one thing that Lisa always does is she models appropriate behavior. You can't walk down the hallway with her without her bending over and picking up something to throw away. So, I know that. So I think, I talk about this on a regular basis, but leadership matters. And the fact that Mrs. Ormond, embraces the portrait of a graduate, embraces the pedagogical approaches that we are implementing, and then gives teachers the autonomy to do amazing things in their classrooms. It just shows what can happen when we start to think differently about learning and value some of the portrait of a graduate competencies as much as academic acumen. So it's just, and by the way, it's fun. You have fun and you're surprised by the kids all the time. So it's really quite amazing. So thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So how do we?
Field trip.
Yes. Yes.
I've gone so many times.
And you ask, how do we pay for this all? Hey.
Nice. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
And Lisa, you're allowed to leave now. So, run.
Zoom call with the
I won't even be offended.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so we are going to start with the May update of the 5-year forecast. And so every time we look at the 5-year forecast, I like to give a disclaimer that this is a forecast. It is not a budget or a spending plan. This is really just a long-term financial planning tool to look at from a very high level. And it's only as good as the assumptions used in it. And the further out you get, the less accurate it's going to be just by the nature of the assumptions. So starting at a high level, the black bars on the graph represent total revenue, the gray, total expenditures, and then the lines represent our projected cash balance and then our cash balance policy threshold. So the green line is the actual and projected cash balance, the blue is the maximum, and the orange is the minimum. So in 23 and 24, well, actually in 25, we're projecting to be slightly above what the policy says is our maximum. But the projection of that line is that our cash balance is continuing to increase into through the end of the current fiscal year. Beyond this year, we're projecting a deficit, which you'll see on the next line, but you can see graphically with the green line decreasing over time. So in May, we'd like to highlight what has changed in our assumptions from the November version of the forecast. And the biggest item is the surplus or deficit number for fiscal year 2024. So in November, we were projecting a deficit, and largely due to interest rates remaining high and having a cash balance, we've been able to capitalize on that and have had higher revenue than what we had forecasted in November. So again, since we are projecting a surplus, that means that our cash balance is continuing to grow through the end of this fiscal year. To look at the cash balance in a different way in terms of the days of cash on hand, that's what our policy is actually, how our policy is actually written. So the minimum being 90 days, maximum 160. The end of this fiscal year, we're projecting to be at 177 days of cash. And this calculation is helpful to look at. I think it's a little bit more relatable if you think about a year of cash balance being 365 days. This is relatable rather than the actual number value. The other thing is that we take into account the transfers and advances that we're doing related to non-operating expenses. So by doing it this way, we're having a more apples-to-apples comparison year over year. And then our formal recommendation, so since we are projecting to be above the policy, our formal recommendation to the board would be either related to, in this case, related to revenue, but since we're projecting to deficit spend in the future years, our recommendation at this point is to keep revenue where it is. So some of the other things we've talked about as we implemented this policy, there's options related to changes to the income tax or property tax levies, but at this point, that would not be recommended. So jumping into revenue, the historical period includes the phase-in of the income tax. So, of course, we would expect over that period of time for revenue to grow at a higher rate than what we're projecting. So over the historical period, revenue grew at a rate of a little over 8%, and then we're projecting to be about 1.5% moving forward. And the most important highlight on this slide is looking at the change from 23 to 24 and noting that that's a decrease. And the biggest reason for that Because even with the interest earnings that we've experienced this year, that did not quite make up for the decrease that we saw in the income tax revenue. So income tax comes in 4 times a year. We have actual numbers for that for this fiscal year with the last payment in April. And that's down about 9.5%. So that's what's driving the decrease in 24. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail in a couple of slides. So I'm just going to highlight our 3 main sources of revenue, the first being property tax. And the most important thing to note here is that all of the bars on the right-hand side are essentially the same. You don't see significant change in property tax revenue because as values increase due to reappraisal, like they did in 2023, tax rates are adjusted down so that the district collects approximately the same amount of revenue. So I highlighted the years where we have reappraisal and update, and that's 23 and 26. And you can actually see the change in the effective tax rate. So in 2023, with the approximately 30% increase that we saw in property values, the tax rates had to be adjusted down by almost 7 mils. So the growth that we do see here, there's a small amount of growth in the forecast. That is due to inside millage. So that's a small portion of our total millage that stays at the same rate, that's not adjusted down. And then we also receive some growth related to new construction. And there are some assumptions related to that based on some residential development we're aware of and some historical trends with commercial.
How much increase was there projected in 2026 for the real estate values relative to?
It's about 8%, and that's pretty much in line with historical trends if you exclude 2023. So 2023, 30% reappraisal is pretty much unheard of, and many experts in tax are not expecting another increase of that size in the update. And also I looked at a longer history, and it seems like in the update years versus reappraisal, the value is not as significant one way or the other. So for those reasons, we don't have as significant growth built into the forecast.
Okay.
And even if it does end up being 30%, it's not going to be material. Okay, next, our second largest source of revenue is the income tax. And as I mentioned, noting the decrease from 23 to 24, and that's based on actual revenue year to date, a 9.5% reduction over prior year. And it's really difficult with the income tax because it's all collected through the state, and we don't receive a lot of detail. The detail that we do get is a breakdown of how much of that revenue is related to earned income, so payroll withholdings, versus all other income. And for us, with having a traditional tax base, the split is about 50-50. And what we're seeing is that the revenue from payroll withholdings from earned income is continuing to increase year over year. It's that other 50% of all other income that has decreased significantly this year. So that can be a wide variety of situations could cause that. So it's really hard to make assumptions related to how long that's going to continue. So with not having very much history, it just adds even more complication, especially when your history includes a pandemic, right? So that's very difficult to do just based on our revenue. So when we're looking at assumptions to use for the forecast, we look at this longer year history, and this is based on total taxable income. So not revenue to the district, because we didn't have the income tax at this time. But since it's a traditional tax, it's taxed on the same basis as the Ohio state income tax. So looking at this over a long period of time, you can see that, as we've said many times, the income tax adjusts with the economic conditions of the community. So that means it goes up as income goes up, goes down as income goes down. And so over this period of time, it's about a 4% increase over this period of time. So that's what we're projecting going forward. The other thing I would note is that there's only one other instance of 2 years of decline in a row, which was in 2008, 2009. So a lot of what we're experiencing now is similar to that, but a lot is also different. So I would not necessarily base next year's assumptions off of what happened then. But that's something that we look at every quarter. It's kind of like a fun game for me to see where the income tax payment comes in and how that compares to the forecast. So the next payment will be coming in July.
We had a really good conversation in the finance committee meeting about this, and some good input from community members, because it's just really tricky to predict. You know, especially, you know, our income tax is roughly 50% earned income from salaries that come out of W-2, and 50% other income, which tends to be much more variable and probably cause this spiky nature of it coming in and out and so forth, depending on market conditions and business decisions and things like that and so forth. So it was good to get the community input to give us some numbers for what we might expect in the forecast. But I think the bottom line is like, it's hard to forecast, right? Because it's so dependent on the economy, which we don't control, which is so dependent on all kinds of other levers and knobs that people pull and things like that. So it's going to continue to do this. And this is a feature of the income tax that we've always sort of known would be there.
Yeah.
But it looks like we've got the best numbers we can in place right now for the forecast.
Can you go back one slide just real quick? Okay, so there's only been, it looks like since whatever that is, 2006, there's only been 4 times when there's been decrease and all the rest have been increase. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I will have to say, like, this doesn't include 2022 data yet because the state is always super behind.
Okay.
But so 2022 is probably going to have part of this decline. So it might not be a decrease of the 9.5% because of timing of how the unearned income tax is paid and then paid towards to us. You may end up seeing the 9.5% decrease split between 2 tax years once we see the data on here, but that's all yet to be determined.
And so that's 5%, 14, and then 3 and 2?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Lastly, the third largest source of revenue is state funding, unrestricted state funding. And on the chart on the right, I like to show this broken down between the formula and the guarantee. Because, and I often forget to even mention this because it's something that has happened forever, is that the state works on a 2-year budget. So anything beyond the current biennium is always subject to change. And also, as we saw in 2020, it's also subject to be decreased or changed in the middle of a biennium. I mean, anything can happen, and that's what we saw in 2020. So it's important to realize how much of our state funding is related to the guarantee portion of the state budget. So as we look forward to 2028, that guarantee amount actually continues to increase, decreases slightly in 28. But what that means is that we're only getting further onto the guarantee. And it's looking at largely property values and income. So based on trends, the district is going to continue to look wealthy and wealthier in the eyes of the state funding formula. That also includes some growth, enrollment growth, so that also means that we can't grow fast enough to get off the guarantee. So unlike many other districts in Lincoln County, if we experience residential development growth and enrollment growth, we're not going to see additional funding in this area.
It's really drastic, the difference in how much it's changing between the formula and the guarantee. It's interesting to see it in that format. And that's really because in the out forecast years, we're expected to grow in property and income value so much more than the rest of the state. Is that?
It's not relative to the state anymore, is the problem. So in the current formula, it doesn't look at how you compare to the state. And so in the current year for 2024, it's not taking into account the reappraisal for 2023 property values yet. That doesn't come into effect until probably 26 and 27. That's why the guarantee amount jumps so drastically, because it's so far behind when it's looking at your property values and your income. So it's probably not including, if you look at, sorry, I went the wrong way. It's not, it probably isn't even looking at 2020 income here. It's probably still looking at an average of 17, 18, and 19, I believe. And then same with property values. So when that catches up to where we are currently, it's going to drive that guarantee amount up.
Can you explain the guarantee again, just like in like
Yes.
really simple, like
Yep.
as simple as possible?
So the guarantee says that you'll receive the same amount of funding that you did in fiscal year 2020.
Got it. And if you don't, yes, okay, all right.
So regardless of what the formula says, regardless of decreases in enrollment, you'll be held harmless and receive the same amount you did in 2020.
Unless the formula says you get more, right? If the formula calculates you get more, you get more.
Well, then you're not on the guarantee.
Right.
Yeah, she was asking.
Right, yeah, okay, all right.
So, so I don't spend a lot of time talking about the actual formula calculation because it doesn't really matter for us because it's not determining our funding. But I do think it's helpful to understand what our what our funding would be if we were on the formula, just on a per pupil basis. So that's what the pie chart shows. So the amount of state funding per pupil would be $1,600, and the local share would be $6,300. So that's a total of about $8,700 per pupil. However, that is not what it actually costs to educate a student. So what our expenditures are showing in the forecast is closer to $14,000 per student. So the difference between the $14,000 what we're actually going to spend and the $8,700 of the formula is automatically made up at the local level.
So why are they saying that it's 8738 when it's not? Sorry, is that too big a
No,
question?
yeah.
No, that's,
It,
How to sum that up is,
they underestimate how much their obligation is to pay. So the system of Ohio isn't necessarily set up to cover the entire cost.
that also doesn't include things like special education and transportations outside of that, and,
What do you mean,
else?
this 8,738 doesn't include that?
Correct. That, so this is just base
Base
cost, and then you have additional components related to special categories that add on top of that, and that is part of the 14,000.
Right, and that is federal money.
No, that's local.
That's
So-
local.
So that is made up of our income tax, our property tax, anything else that's collected locally, fees, that.
And we don't get federal funding because?
We receive some federal fundings, but
Right.
federal funding is not included in the forecast. So the
Oh,
forecast is
okay.
just general fund, which is the property tax, state funding, and income tax largely.
You guys, I've been sitting here for how many years? I'm like, I feel like I know nothing. So I'm sure many, many, many people who do not do this once a month are just like, I can understand why it's very confusing. but-
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I also, it's hard for me not to think that I do this every day, so it's hard for me to think like, things like that to mention. So I'm glad that you highlighted that, because yes, that is a basic assumption of the forecast, is it's just general operating fund. So when we look at like appropriations that you approve periodically throughout the year, that includes all other funds, and this is just general fund.
Now, is the 14,000, is that what it costs for a student in the state, or that's ours?
That's ours based
Okay.
on fiscal year 2024.
Okay.
How do we compare with other districts in terms of?
So
spending?
based on previous years, we're pretty much in alignment. I mean, it was closer to 12,000, 13,000 per student in the last couple of years. And per pupil expenditure gets kind of weird based on what's included, what's excluded, what enrollment number you're using, and all of that. But that's a ballpark. 14,000 is probably a little bit higher because, and I'll talk about this on the expenditure side, some changes that we had in '24 in the same year that we had declining enrollment, which is driving a little bit of an increase in that for this year.
It's a really good question, though, and it's one that we often try to highlight and bring up during levy conversations, right? Is what's your cost per pupil, right? And I would guess generally the message historically is probably the same as now, is that we cost about the same as comparable districts, usually less than most of our comparable districts in Central Ohio, but probably more than the other districts in Lincoln County, right? And I think that's an important metric to kind of continue to keep in mind because although it's complicated and there's a lot of different things in there, you kind of can't hide it and it's easy for people to relate to, right? I think people can say, oh, okay, we're getting a great education for less cost than many of the places in Central Ohio, right? We're getting a great education for about the same as districts like us around the state, and it's reasonable that we might pay a little bit more than other districts in Lincoln County because of the product or for whatever and so forth, right? So I think that's a really important metric to kind of keep out there, although it's not a great one financially because again, there's a lot of things that go into it and so forth. It's an important one that is something that the community can relate to because there's so many complicated things. You know, it's really tricky what the formula is and what the funding is and whether the income tax goes up and down and so forth, right? I think if you stay focused on a simple metric like that, you can get people to engage in it and say, okay, I understand. Right? Or that's my experience when I've had a lot of these conversations during levy times. So thank you for keeping that front center with more on that.
Yeah, so we'll look at that more on the expenditure side, so we'll jump right into that. So over the historical period, total expenditures increased about 3.6%, and the forecast is showing 8.3%. And the big difference here is this is including the transfers out. So in 2020, the athletic complex transfer is included, and then in '24 is also when we started the transfers for the capital projects fund. So those have to be included in our total expenditures as part of the forecast, but I'll note where I have excluded those in calculations so that we have a more apples to apples comparison. In 2024, we also added staff positions, which I can jump into, well, let's talk about expenditure per pupil some more. So historically, expenditure per pupil increased at a rate of about 2.25%, and we're projecting a little under 6%. And why this is important is to compare it to those changes in total expenditures. And what this does is it takes the enrollment growth factor out of the equation. So if you have increasing enrollment, your expenditure per pupil is probably going to increase at a different rate than your total expenditures. You know expenditures are going to grow because you're adding teachers to account for the students. But when you look at expenditure per pupil, it takes that out of the equation. And then the other thing that's important to look at in terms of expenditure per pupil is this reasonable, not only in terms of comparing to other districts, but how does that relate to inflation? Because with 80% of our budget being salary and benefits, that's an important benchmark to use to compare. So to do that calculation, we're using 2017 as a base year and applying the rate of inflation in each year to that base year. So that's what the orange line is representing on this chart. So in some years where our expenditure per pupil is above what inflation said we should be spending, and in some years it's below that. So even with the growth in expenditures for 2024, we're still below where inflation says we should be for this year. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen to that line going forward. I don't even want to put a projected inflation number on here, so I didn't. But that is a metric that we use and we'll add to the graph as we move to the out years.
And I'll say that kind of historically, I'm kind of a fan of this metric, even though it's complicated or whatever. But if you look historically at expenditure per pupil, and maybe in all 5-year forecasts that I've seen over the past 10, 15 years or whatever, it often looks like the forecast number is higher than the historical number, right? And a little bit of that is because this is not a budget, it's a forecast.
Right.
Right, and we include in here specifically some things to be a little conservative, to make sure that we can cover our costs, and we know when we need to have levy increases, or whatever it is, and so forth. So the fact that, for me, like, forecast number much higher than historical number is a big red flag, right? That's like a thing to watch out, like, why is this happening? Let's understand the root cause of this. There is definitely a piece of this that's conservative to some extent, and a piece we need to keep watching.
Yeah.
Right, and make sure that, as we have changes in enrollment, we don't just hire, but we adjust class sizes, right? Or we adjust, where staffing sits, and this is something that we've done historically to keep our expense growth in check appropriately and so forth. And I have every expectation that we'll continue to operate the same way we have in the past. And this is the right number to put in the forecast, but not necessarily what we're gonna end up with, because we know it's gonna be different. But that's an important number and an important thing to recognize.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, that this is very typical. Any forecast you're gonna look at is going to project a higher forecast amount, unless there's some serious issues, right? But it's always better to end up with more cash at the end of the year than less cash. So that is the main reason for the conservative forecast. But that's a good segue into staffing. So I'll jump into the staffing for next year, because I think that really speaks to your points. So we are adding an intervention specialist position that we didn't replace this year, because based on numbers, we didn't need to. Well, we need it for next year, so we're adding it for next year. Our reading intervention position, we're moving it into the general fund, and Cecile, to your point, this was ESSER, so it's federal, so it wasn't included in here, but now it is, because we're moving it to the general fund. We're adding an assistant athletic director position, but then also what's not written here is we're not replacing a first grade position.
Correct.
Due to retirement and not meeting based on kindergarten enrollment numbers. So all of what you're seeing here speaks to those very points. We do that annually, and just because we have enrollment growth positions in the out years that I have outlined on the slide, that's not what we're gonna add. We're gonna add based on what we need.
Great point.
Yes.
Other assumptions related and driving salaries, which is of course our largest expenditure line item, are steps for staff, which is approximately 1.6%, and base salary increases. So for next year, we're anticipating 3.25% increase, and then although it extends beyond the current agreement, 3% for the years after that. So that's of course subject to negotiations, but that's a little bit higher than what we've included in the past, based on inflation, based on where we're seeing other districts wanting to stay competitive in a tough market. So that's what's driving a majority of that growth, in addition to the enrollment positions that we talked about. Benefits, all of the same assumptions in salaries in terms of adding additional staff carried through to benefits. We include an allocation essentially for any future positions, assuming they take family insurance and our plan stays the same, everything like that. But what really drives growth in this line item is our medical insurance. So for lack of better way to put it, we've been lucky the last several years in where our rates have landed, and going out to bid and getting quotes from various providers, and companies wanting to buy our business, essentially. So we are not anticipating that to continue into 2025. We don't have a rate cap that we've had in some previous years, so we will be going out to bid again. But based on several factors, we're anticipating potentially a 20% increase in premiums for calendar year 2025, which will split between 25 and 26 on the slide, because those are fiscal years. And then 10% for the years after that. The 20% is tough because it is still part of the current collective bargaining agreement, so there's nothing we can do related to employee-employer contribution split, HSA contributions, or plan design. So really our only tool right now is going out to bid for quotes from the provider or from the carriers. In 26 through 28, we will have a multitude of options related to plan design, employer share and HSA contributions, as well as potentially consortiums or self-funding. There's no end of options when it comes to medical insurance, so that is the benefit that we would have in those projected years. Purchase service is another area that has probably changed the most since November. A lot of this is when we think about the forecast in terms of controllable and uncontrollable costs. This is probably more of the uncontrollable, and that has increased since November in the special education services that are being provided and associated transportation. We also have some timing differences that are driving the increase from 23 to 24. So if you remember our change from ABM to Harvard, we had both payments for both companies hit in July of this year, so that artificially decreased 23 and artificially increased 24, so that's driving a larger difference between the 2 years. And then we also have timing of an electrical payment and timing of the transition from Zoom to Windstream for phone services and trying to get that service terminated. So a lot of different smaller items have added up to that change since November. And since this is our third largest source, just wanted to provide a little bit more detail because it includes, that's what all the different colors are for, it includes a wide variety of types of services. And lastly, all other expenditures, and usually we kind of gloss over this too because it's a smaller line item, but we've had some significant changes from 23 to 24 that I wanted to highlight. The first being the implementation of the capital projects fund, so that's the difference in the brown section of the bar that is added for 24 through 28. The green in 23 was the portion of the HVAC project that we co-funded between ESSER and general fund. Actually hit the forecast as a capital outlay. Now we're doing it in capital needs as a transfer, so that's the difference between the two colors there. And then lastly, the orange section is supplies, which usually is a pretty static number, but due to the science of reading material purchase that we approved, I think 2 months ago, that increased pretty significantly from last year. That's a good example of being conservative because if you notice, our forecast is kind of based off of 24 being the base for supplies, but I think that's safe in terms of we have then capacity for any new state mandates that come out that we have accounted for, because I think we've kind of joked internally about the science of math and the science of science and these things that we all know are potentially coming. So we have that built in. And of course, we're not going to buy materials related to a new math curriculum. It's not required or needed, but it is the forecast. Okay, so that's a good segue then into what's going to morph into the financial report now for April. So the Capital Projects Fund, the benefit to doing the Capital Projects Fund versus just funding it directly out of the general fund is the level of detail that I'm going to present monthly and have been presenting monthly. So now that we have multiple projects, I'm showing this a little bit differently so that we can track each one separately. And then after this meeting, we approve the transfer for the theater dimmer rack. That will be added on here as well. So the blue is showing what we've spent project to date, and that's the other thing too, is that this will be project to date versus fiscal year. So it helps us track some of these capital projects that extend beyond one fiscal year, largely because the procurement timeline is taking so much longer for some of these items by the time you order and wait for materials to be delivered. So we'll continue to track these projects into next fiscal year as well as feeder project as well. COVID-related funds, you can't even hardly see them anymore on the graph. So we are continuing to pay the reading intervention position, and as I mentioned, that will transition to general fund after, or when new contracts start for next year in August. And then we have one payment to make for some science of reading PD, which is nice, so we can actually use ESSER, small amount of ESSER funds towards that PD, and then summer intervention, so that'll be timesheets as staff complete that over summer. I also wanted to provide just a really high-level investment update. This was provided to Finance Committee as well, but I thought this was important since it is becoming a larger portion of our revenue. And I am by no means the expert on this, and I am repurposing slides that Ryan Nelson from Red Tree presented, so full disclosure on that. But one of the most important things that I think Ryan highlighted is the difference in the interest rates for short-term versus long-term investments. So Star Ohio is earning the highest rate right now at just under 5.5% versus a 10-year treasury that's at 4.69%. And so what that means is that having our money in Star Ohio, which you'll see on the next, that I always present as part of the cash reconciliation every month, that's why we keep a majority of our funds in Star Ohio right now. Because it's going to earn us a higher rate. I can go on Star Ohio and have that transferred to our checking account within the same business day. So it's also very liquid. So it's a win-win all around. It's very liquid and earning a high rate. But this is very unique. This is not something that we saw in 2008, 2009. So it's probably not going to last for too much longer, where short-term rates are this much higher than long-term. So that's why we're working with an investment advisor and purchasing some longer-term investments to lock in a slightly higher rate, but knowing that we'll get that return for that longer period of time. So it's finding the right balance between having liquid cash, getting these, and getting these higher rates. So looking at the Red Tree portfolio, another thing to highlight is just how limited we are in what we can invest in. So that these rates might seem really low compared to what you're able to do individually, but we are limited to the options that you see in the pie chart. That's our current portfolio with Red Tree. And then the expected income for the current year just through the Red Tree investments is almost $300,000, and then they're projecting just under $400,000 for the next year. So cash reconciliation, you can see that we started with 8 million, well, we started with 5 and added 3 more. But that's kind of a nice, just quick way to see how much has that earned over time, because you can just subtract 8 million from that and know that since we started with them, almost $500,000 in interest has been earned. But we still do have majority of funds, about 16 million, and Star Ohio. That's earning an even higher rate. And that is it for the monthly financial as well. If I was presenting separate from the forecast, the highlight would really be related to that final income tax payment. That was made in April, so that's what we would have talked about. That's already looped in and factored into the forecast. Any questions or additional comments? Do you have anything I've missed since you've now heard this 16 times?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, I got a couple questions as as the 5-year forecast circulated around the community, kind of highlighting again that it's sort of a complicated thing. People said, oh my gosh, it looks like you're going to be into deficit spending for the next few years. What are we going to do to adjust that? It's like, well, that's the levy cycle, right? We know that during some periods of time we increase our cash balance because our taxes are above expenses, and some periods it's less, right? That's just a part of life, right? If you look at the cash balance, we're healthy right now, and like we've said before, it's going to be reducing over the next several years, at which point, we'll probably need to, like we do every once in a while, put an incremental property tax levy on ballot. But it doesn't look like that's in the next couple of years, and time will tell when that is the appropriate time for that.
Yep, that's a really good point. That's the whole threading the needle between the minimum and the maximum cash balance. And this 5-year forecast is probably a perfect example of that, of starting it right above the maximum and ending it just below the minimum. So that's a perfect example of that levy cycle that you're going to see in pretty much any district across the state.
Especially because the majority of our income is still coming from property tax. So that's actually by design. And, you know, when we made the commitment to the income tax in 2018, we communicated that cycle, that up and down cycle. It would just be elongated. And hopefully we can elongate it for almost 10 years before, you know, 10 years from inception. You know, where new money would be requested.
Yeah, but looking at the cash balance, you know, do you have anything that we can say to the community that says there won't be an incremental property tax levy for the next 2 years or 3 years, or when do you see that potentially happening?
Well, I mean, just based on the cash balance policy, we're projecting to be within that through fiscal year 2027. When you get into fiscal year 2028, we're projecting to be at 51 days of ending cash balance. That's when our policy would dictate and what would make practical sense as well.
Well
To
said.
start talking
I
about.
would have said the same thing.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I just think it's good to make that comment and things like that.
Yeah.
People say, oh, your cash balance is going down. Yep, that's by design. Okay.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
thank you, that was a great report.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at the point in the agenda for public comments. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public. For the purpose of conducting the school district's business, it is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. If anyone would like to address the board, ask you to come up to the podium and give your name and address. Okay, with that overwhelming response, go to board discussion.
I wanted to start by just, you know, again, thanking Ms. Sorman for her, you know, capturing some of the energy that's occurring at GMS and some of the great work that our students are doing. And I would also be remiss if I didn't say how lucky we are to have a very, very, very competent treasurer. So,
I would also like to say, because I did fail to mention this, that the forecast is very much a team effort.
It is.
And we work very closely on all of the assumptions.
that's why I said she was competent, because she has to work with me through that entire process.
That's tolerant.
Yes, tolerant. Competent and tolerant, yes.
Yeah, Mrs. Orman's voice was very different, right? Like, it's clear that this concept of students taking control of their education has a lot of positive energy with it. It's just really great to see that coming out, and I think it's going to be contagious. Right, it's already starting to grow. We've got twice as many sections as before and things like that, and the media class as well. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to that trickling its way into all the rest of our curriculum and see what kind of energy we get out of that. It was great for her to present.
I really enjoyed how Sorman shared kids continuing on the project, whether school was done or, and also when there's roadblocks, how to work with them. I think it's terrific how it's exciting stuff, I think. I mean, I sure didn't have any of this when I was in middle school, anything near this, and this is terrific. I'd just like to mention, as the CTEC representative, I attended the CTEC Honor Society program where Granville had 15, I believe, students inducted into it. And they had probably 70 students overall that were in attendance, and it's one of their bigger classes. So it was a very nice event.
And next year's enrollment at CTEC is close to 32.
Really?
Yeah. It'll be our largest class ever, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great trend. Yeah, do such great stuff there.
Just real quick from Granville Education Foundation, they are celebrating their 30th year. And so Blue, White, and Boom right around the 4th of July is going to be a big event. And they've also been really tapping into alumni and engaging alumni. So also they'll have some more plans around homecoming. So that'll be fun.
Do you know when the Blue, White, and Boom thing is? You know what day it is?
I sure do, somewhere.
That's fine.
July. No, it's June 30th? Is it? No. It's the Sunday, isn't it? No. We're doing great over here.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sure to let you know. Maybe, but
Yeah.
before the end of the meeting.
That's it.
We'll get to it.
The festivals run the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Right. I actually was
Third.
3rd.
Oh, really? Okay.
third or
Who's gonna get to it faster?
I mean, for the GEF to engage alumni is really cool too. I think we've still got great opportunities there and things, you know, from young alumni to the senior alumni and things. Having them step up to that is really fantastic, so.
Yeah, you know, to tack on to the finance aspect, Thomas and I sit on that committee. Brittany gave an excellent presentation this past week, not only to us two board members, but the community members that sit on that board as well. And the takeaway I had was they're very confident with our cash in on-hand policy that we've adopted as a board on how we effectively navigate threading that needle, as Jeff famously says. But then additionally, right, what they can expect from us too. So as the 5-year forecast indicates, right, we're not going through a constant cycle of levy fatigue, as a lot of other districts are right now, through either failed property tax levies earlier last cycle and now again come this November. So I think we've positioned ourselves in a great, you know, diversification of income when it comes to that income tax.
Yeah, and the folks in the finance committee really do appreciate it and understand it and things, but we got to continue to find ways to reach out to the rest of the community, right? To make sure that they have the basics that they understand and so forth, so they can see where we're headed financially and what the impacts are going to be of enrollment growth and so forth. So a lot of opportunity there.
Do you feel like there's a good number of people on that committee?
There's a good number of people that received the invitation. We had probably the largest group, since I've been here in the fall, at maybe 15 people or so, but then last week was like 5. So it varies drastically. So, I mean, we can always use more participation and things to add to the list, certainly. We also could probably do a better job of getting that out, like a list of dates, which there's usually one too, but on our website and calendars so that people have those dates in advance. And then I just had a really great idea that maybe the GMS media group can put together some materials to put out on social media related to.
PSA.
I love it. That's a great idea.
All right, and Blue, White, and Boom is Saturday, July 6th.
Thank you.
So after all the festivities, you can really
Okay.
party with the GEF, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Do you have any updates on the strategic planning task force or things of significance there? Is there a meeting coming up?
So our last meeting, the representatives from Fanning and Howie, the architectural firm that is leading the facility master planning process, presented and talked about their role as a steering committee in the facility master planning process and what role they would play in the community engagement process as well that kicks off in the fall. But we're really, you know, at this point, we're just tracking all the moving parts of what's happening, not only from development standpoint, but also, you know,
the internal conversations about, programming, outreach to different entities, enrollment tracking, all of the, along the 5 goals that we have established for the committee. But I anticipate that we're really just setting the stage for a fall launch of the facility master planning process.
And Fanning and Howdy did a really nice job of
Yeah.
that. I know a lot of community members there that I think are going to be willing to help spread the word, but it needs to be a full court press in the fall to make sure we get alignment around facilities and an understanding about what our plan is whenever we need to pull that off.
Correct.
Great.
Okay, action agenda.
Excellent. 10.01 is the approval of a support services agreement.
So moved.
Second.
And we have a couple of items that are all related to student services contracts for the next year. So they will all be related to special education.
And these are typical annual renewals?
Yes, correct.
Please take the roll.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Next item, I am happy to.
So moved.
The approval of the 23-24 graduates. I think Mr. Miller made a motion and then Ms. Deeds, yes. Very appropriate. As always, we're very proud of the graduating class and their accomplishments, and look forward to hopefully having dry weather on graduation. We've moved to the Walter J. Hodges Stadium for those festivities, and so now we are subject to weather, but we're gonna have great weather.
Where would we go?
Stop talking about the weather.
We would go into the gymnasium. That's our plan B, but again, it's also live streamed, so we always.
I'll be on the live stream.
But all, the
I love
list
graduation.
is pending successful completion of all the additional requirements. They're not fully done yet, so.
It's in your slide right
Yeah,
now?
right,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. They still need to finish off.
But this is a great month. There's lots of great celebrations relative to it. Our music and theater program was fantastic, so it's a great thing.
AP presentations
Yeah.
later this week as well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Please take the roll.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
You've done your part. Okay, 10.03 is the approval of an agreement with Knox County ESC.
So moved. Second.
Nothing more to add.
Why do we partner with Knox County? Do we can you explain just a smidge more about that?
Yes, I can. Thank you for asking.
I know there was nothing else to add, but apparently there is.
This is also related to special education services.
Great, thank you.
Please take the roll.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.04 is the approval of the contract with the Learning Spectrum for students with special needs.
So moved.
Second.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.05, approval of the MOUs with the Granville Education Association.
So moved. Second.
Okay, there are 2 MOUs that we have that have made their way through the approval process through the GEA. The first is a courier position, identifying the process for bidding that position out annually. And then the second is, and probably more important, materially for the membership is a 0.5% salary increase on the base in the last year of this current contract for 24-25, as well as close to a $2 increase in the base rate of pay for the aides that we employ. When we did a market analysis, Mr. Petrie, identified a significant issue related to our aide salary pay. They were towards the bottom of all of our markets. And we have had open positions the entire year that we have not been able to fill. So we're excited to, address a couple of needs through these MOUs. And the 3.25 that was reflected in the 5-year forecast included this 0.5% rate of pay increase.
Yeah, we need to do what we need to do, and whether it's been the changes to the bus driver salary to be able to retain bus drivers, whether it be EAs, but, for all of our staff, we gotta make sure that we're treating them right, so we can continue to retain the great staff that we have. That's a critical part of what we do.
Absolutely.
I'm very supportive.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Thank you. 10.06 is the approval of the resolution authorizing agreements with Brightline Company.
So moved.
Second.
As you know, we are trying to work our way through the district removing carpet, which is not necessarily the most healthy product. So we are replacing it with LVT and multiple classrooms. So this is to continue that process.
And that'll happen before the summer?
Correct.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Next is the approval of the contract with Corda Engineering Design Company for Waterline GIS.
So moved.
Second.
Will that increase now, since we were on well, increase our cost of water to the GIS?
So,
Start paying for it
yes,
now, I guess?
we will. So, first of all of this is still not finally approved. This is all the pre-work for that approval process to occur. But yes, in the long run, it will actually cost more for the water, but we will get out of the business of having to check it every single day with staff and replacing those components that break down because we're on a well.
Yeah.
So,
Lead, suction.
yes, all of the above.
But still remain on septic out there.
We are sewer out there
Sewer
already.
okay.
Yeah. When that building was built, they ran one sewer line and no water line. So,
And is it the municipal utility provider's responsibility to pay for a part of this, or how does this contract relate to what the village might be doing
So
on their
this-
side to understand?
this contract is is purely just the engineering side of looking at what is needed to get out there. So that's the design side of the equation. The agreements will be forthcoming, and that will outline, if we're running that water line out there and they want fire hydrants, they will pay for the fire hydrants. We won't. So little things like that will be baked into an overall agreement with the village to extend the water once we make that final decision.
So is this effectively our request to the village to extend utilities, or is this the village's offer?
No, this is just the engineering.
You would think they would pay for it. The village would pay for it because they're the ones who are on it.
No,
No?
that's not how it works.
Okay.
Just ask Dr. Wagner.
No.
So,
Now, can the village
all those are,
observe the design, so that the engineering design?
yes, as a provider, they can. That's a negotiation, but things like tap fees, remember when we built the athletic complex, they waived the tap fee as part of an in-kind donation. All those are subject to further negotiations down the road. This is just getting a sense of what is necessary from a design standpoint and an engineering standpoint for that to occur.
And what's the cost of the contract we're being asked to approve?
The Corda is, I'll have to get back to you. I think it's less than $30,000 of engineering cost.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller? Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Okay, next is the approval of the contract with Krieger Ford for the purchase of a maintenance van.
So moved.
Second.
So as part of our annual PI process, we look at all of our fleet and identify what is necessary for the future. The maintenance van would be a van that would be outfitted with the tools that can travel to all the different buildings for what needs to be repaired. Right now, we load and unload as needed, and it's not necessarily most time effective. And then one of the current trucks will be then utilized by the transportation department to service broken down buses. Right now, the blue bus, if you've ever seen it going out to broken down buses, that's going away. We're gonna put that to rest. And we'll have a different way of providing service to vehicles that have broken down.
Smaller way of providing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is that vehicle a capitalizable expense, or is it just an operating expense? Is it a capital expense? Or is
Yeah,
it-
it's a capital expense.
Anything over 5,000.
Okay.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Okay, 10.09 is the approval of a contract with Hamilton Fencing to replace the stadium fencing.
So moved.
Second.
If you remember, when we did the original athletic complex, we did not replace the existing fencing, except for the areas that were brand new. And the current fence is eroding, and we are gonna add bars at the bottom so that people don't crawl underneath either. So it will be a much more secure environment in the future.
Do we get groundhogs in there? I'm
We
just
get
curious.
we get groundhogs everywhere.
Okay, no deer.
Yeah,
Maybe?
sometimes, I mean, you never know.
You know,
All
right,
kinds of
you know,
critters.
sure, though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't want the turf. I know, I know.
Yeah.
Including students in off hours.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
What's the, just out of curiosity, what's the current policy for public utilization or student utilization of the stadium facility?
So-
Hours?
The majority of the use is for the track, and that's open to the public quite often. The utilization of the field is by appointment, and people schedule that with Mr. DeVal. One, because there are some things that we try and do to maintain that asset, so that people understand that they can't eat on the field, wear spikes, all the things that would degrade the long-term sustainability of that product.
Take the roll, please.
Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.10 is the approval of an agreement with Armor Paving and Sealing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this is also related to the parking lot projects that we typically maintain over the summer months. So it will be, paving and sealing different areas, but one of the main costs is going to be making the area between the baseball diamond and the stadium handicap accessible. Right now it has rocks and gravel, and it's very difficult to get wheelchairs back in that area. So we'll have some designated parking areas for people who need handicap parking.
That's good.
What's the total payment cost this summer, or what's this?
We have 214,000.
Well, total paving, asphalt, and concrete is 386. Just this portion is 200,000.
Okay.
Please take the roll.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.11 is the approval of the resolution waiving competitive bid and authorizing agreements with Claypool and BMI for the dimmer rack project. And it is urgent necessity.
Second.
Okay, so when something is of urgent necessity, we have the ability to potentially not have the 3 bidding quotes, and the dimmer rack project is one of those. We did get an additional quote, but we didn't get 3. But it is something that we have to replace more urgently, and it does take a long time to actually replace that product. So it's almost 4 to 6 months of engineering just associated with it, and then the implementation or integration into our system. So it takes a long time.
What happens in the fall for shows or?
We hope that it works until they make the transition.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Is this the approval of contract or approval of waiving?
Yes, it is the approval of the Claypool contract, BMI contract, and the waiving of the competitive bid process.
And what's the total price tag of this one?
$169,500.
Yes.
Take your roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wald?
Aye.
And then 10.12 is the approval of a resolution authorizing membership in the In Compliance Consulting National Purchasing Consortium.
So moved.
Second. Oops, sorry.
You're fine.
Can you just explain?
So we participate in a lot of purchasing consortiums to get competitive bidding processes that have been done through the consortium. We have probably, 3 or 4?
Yeah, I think this is the one that like Bricker
Yeah, suggests.
has like created for some of these, like I know specifically for armor, paving.
Okay. Like the bus, I remember.
Yeah.
This is.
Yes,
if
buses,
we
we also-
needed to,
yeah.
we would use
Yeah,
that.
so there are certain, essentially they handle the bidding process so that we don't have to invest in, a lot of the bidding process is coming up with the requirements, the criteria of what you want submitted. And so the consortiums handle that piece and have pricing available. So it just makes the process a lot more efficient and it's quicker to procure.
And then also, does it help with cost because we are working with other entities?
Yeah, so the cost is really that it's competitively bid at a higher level, so it's creating competition amongst the other vendors when they're submitting to the consortium. Not necessarily because of volume purchasing necessarily, where you're like pooling with other districts, but
Right.
just that they're handling the competitive bidding portion, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So there's no direct cost associated with this line item, it's just a
It's,
approval.
yeah, if you pull down that contract, then, you know, you're buying into the costs associated with that.
Right, and the program achieves their revenue through a percentage of the purchase price?
Some of, yes, there are some that work in that manner. I'm not sure what the exact mechanism is for their funding for this consortium.
It's like Meta is who we use for the
Right.
buses, and they're in ITC, and so have different funding related to that. And this, like I said, I believe this is Bricker, and so honestly, the cost savings for them of, well, and for us, of having to write an individual contract for every district that's going to work with Armor Paving. Instead, they can negotiate one contract with Armor Paving and just hand it out to each district. So I don't obviously know the details of their financials, but that's the value to them.
Do they have multiple contract requirements for competitive bidding? Like, so does Ricker have, do these consortiums have to go out and get?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
They have to apply
with either
comply
state
with
or
the same
federal. Yeah,
competitive bidding regulations?
correct. It doesn't make their contract list if they haven't gone through that process.
Great, because we, I'm sure, have to cover that one way or another, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Okay, next is the consent agenda, 1101 A through D with the amended aspect of the supplemental list, removing Mr. Carl Kiefer from the high school math team leader position. That is what we amended at the very beginning.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'd like to walk through a couple of different highlights of this consent agenda. First is the elementary PTO GIS playground donation of $25,000. That is for the some of the items that were originally purchased with the reconstruction of that playground. We are currently working on potentially a different surface to go into that location as well. And then Luella Hodges Reese of $100,000 to the athletic complex scoreboard.
Thank you.
Under employment, we have all of our certified and classified contract renewals. So again, we have 1, 2, and 3-year contracts on the, and then continuing on the certified and 2-year contracts and continuing contracts on the classified. We have exempt employee contract renewals, administrative, and then supplementals for the 24-25 school year to start the fall. And then also, there's a related item that we non-renew all the pupil activity contracts for this year so that those contracts terminate and then new contracts are employed. We have extended school year services, we have extended time contracts, we have a couple of resignations. Josh Quire, the current assistant principal at the middle school, is moving closer to home, so he is going to be leaving us. And we had another bus driver resign. And then we have some stipends, and we have a couple of new hires, Kaylee Coker and Alexander Adams, for GHS physical education and GHS mathematics. And then we have our final maintenance technician, Andrew Wilson, for the completion of the 23-24 school year, and then there will be another item in next month's agenda for 24-25, hopefully. And then a field trip, Blue Steel traveling to Virginia Beach for the Steel Drum Festival.
For Alexander Adams at the high school mathematics teacher, where is he coming from? Is he going to take all of the current class load that would have been covered by the teacher that departed recently? Or
No, they're actually shifting some staff around. So I believe Mrs. Bryson is going to be teaching the calculus course, and Mr. Adams will be teaching one of her courses that she's vacating.
Okay.
And he is coming to us from Reynoldsburg. I was going to guess that, but I wanted to check. Thank you, Brett.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.01, approval of the April 2024 financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.02, approval of the transfer from general fund to the capital projects fund for the theater dining room.
So moved.
Second.
So Jeff explained the need there, and then this, again, as I discussed in the forecast presentation, we're handling as a transfer, and will be added to our report going forward.
Okay, take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.03, appropriation resolution for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
So this kind of speaks to the point, so the appropriations, basically it's a fancy way of saying the budget at the fund level. So this goes to the point of the forecast is not a budget, so although we have the transfers included in the forecast, we did not budget for them because we had not approved them at the board level. So we're adjusting the appropriation for those transfers, as well as we have a final payment to actually make to the library for their levy, and that amount has come in higher than what we had budgeted, so we're making those two adjustments.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.04, the resolution of necessity for renewal tax for the Granville Public Library.
So moved.
Second.
As you know, we are the taxing authority for the Granville Public Library, and their levy is up for renewal. So I do have a statement. Emily is also here to answer any questions that you may have, but she did provide us with a statement on behalf of the library. And this is the first of a two-step process that's required by the Board of Education. So we pass this resolution, the county auditor certifies the amount, we come back in June, have the resolution to proceed, and then that's submitted to the Board of Elections, and it appears on the ballot in November. So the Granville Public Library is requesting the Granville Village School District Board of Education approve placing our renewal and increase levy of 1.25 mils on the November 2024 ballot. This is the first increase the library has requested in 14 years since the original levy was approved in 2010. We plan to use the increased funds to expand our community engagement department and offer outreach services to our growing service community. So this was 1 mil and is increasing to 1.25 mils.
And do those adjust with inflation of house values?
No, well, yes, so the 1 mil is currently collecting an effective rate of like about 0.6, I think, based on the 2023 rate renewal. So they're in a similar boat where they would receive additional revenue based on new construction. Also, a portion is related to public utility, which is taxed at the full voted rate, so that tends to increase over time as well. But certainly not significantly enough to keep up with inflation.
So this is part of a levy cycle, much like the schools.
Correct.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.05, approval of the then and now resolution for Rush Trucks Center for a bus turbo.
Nice. Second. Turbo buses. Great.
Don't ask.
Bus 36, I know?
It's not nitrous oxide. Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Seems like it was necessary.
Yes.
It's bust real fast.
No, it regulates all of those buses too. No, I'm just go slow.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
This is the most items I've ever had on the agenda. 12.06, approval of the 5-year forecast.
So, second.
Any other questions or comments on the forecast?
Great job. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Crum?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.07, approval of the payments in lieu of transportation for the 23-24 school year.
So moved.
Second.
This is the second step of a two-step process every year. We're required to provide transportation for all students, all resident students. So those students attending non-public schools, we go through a process to determine transportation impractical. That's the first resolution that's passed earlier in the school year. And then this is actually approving payments to those parents. The payment is a little over $1,000. It's set, the amount is set by the state annually based on transportation data that's collected from all districts across the state, and that is the average cost to transport a student. And we have a handful, 5 or 6 students that are receiving that this year.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
And I was accurate, that the quarter contract was roughly $30,000.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Thank you.
That's all right.
We're done.